Krishna, 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 Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So I'm just thinking there's only 5 minutes for Aarti. So I was just wondering what to do. Whether to start the shloka now or do it after the Aarti. Okay, we'll do it now. Prakrtyaiva Dharmani Niyamani Sarvasya Anupaśyati sampadyate prakrtyaiva ca karmani kriyamanani sarvasya anupaśyati tatātmāham akirtāṁ sapashyati prakrtyaiva ca karmani kriyamanani sarvasya anupaśyati tatātmāham akirtāṁ sapashyati prakrtyaiva ca karmani kriyamanani sarvasya anupaśyati tatātmāham akirtāṁ sapashyati karmani kriyamanani sarvasya anupaśyati tatātmāham akirtāṁ sapashyati. In this purport, Prabhupada made many significant points. These purports are very important to understanding the verses. When Prabhupada would be dictating these purports, he would first read the purports by the previous acharyas. He would take the essence of the commentaries of the acharyas and then add what was relevant to make it easy possible for us to understand the translation. Once Prabhupada was dictating the purport, and he was dictating very, very slowly. So his secretary asked him, Prabhupada, why are you dictating so slowly? Prabhupada said, every word that I put in these books will be read for the next 10,000 years. So I have to be very careful what is in these books. So Krishna is pointing out in these verses how the self does not mix with anything. Now it's all prevailing in the body. The sky is all prevailing, but it does not mix with anything. The air may enter into stew, mud, water, etc. But still it is separate from this. So Krishna is explaining that this material body that we have, this body is created by material nature, and the self is distinct from the body. Rest will continue after our departure. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So we'll continue discussing the verse that we read from the Gita before the Aarti. I hope you devotees haven't forgotten the translation of Prabhupada that we read before the Aarti. So we'll just continue with the discussion. So Prabhupada is saying that this body is made of material nature. And the body we obtain is influenced by the type of activities that we have performed in the past, according to our past desires. So the important point to recognize is that the Lord has given every individual freedom. That is, the freedom to accept the Lord or the freedom to reject the Lord. And the body is given so that we can fulfill our different desires. Just like it is said, Krishna bhai-moga bhoga vancha karadikata samaya tare japatya dhare. That the moment the living entity develops the desire to become an enjoyer of the Lord, he is to leave the spiritual world and come to the material world. And based on our past karma, based on our desires, based on where the mind is at the moment of death, one obtains a suitable body. This is actually a great science to understand how the soul transmigrates from one body to another body. Once Prabhupada was giving a lecture at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the most famous institutions in America. It's one of the most prestigious high-tech institutes of learning in America. So Prabhupada opened his lecture at the institute by asking, is there any department in this great university which tells you what happens after death? Is there any department in Moscow University that tells you what happens after death? No. Or in any institute in Moscow? There's no institute department. So Lord Kapila-dev's teachings can be studied in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Lord Kapila-dev was asked a very similar question by his mother Devahuti. She said, my dear son, you are very knowledgeable. Please tell me, how is it ascertained what type of body one is going to get? The son said, Karma deva netrena jantu deho papate stira pravashudaram pum savreta kanashraha. The translation of this verse of Sanskrit is as follows. First he said, Karma deva netrena. Karma means your actions. Deva means the eyes of the demigods. Deva means demigods, netrena means eyes of the demigods. So Lord Kapila-dev explained that all the actions that we perform are being witnessed by the eyes of several demigods. And all these demigods who are witnessing every action that we perform, then based on that, the soul enters through the semen of the male into the womb of the female. So Prabhupada is making this important point in the purport that this body is made by material nature. This body is given to us according to our desires. Where the soul, the self, is distinct from the body. The Bhagavad Gita instructs us how to act so that one can be elevated to a higher position. Why do we study the Bhagavad Gita? Why do we study the Vedic texts? For the simple reason that if we study them, we take the guidance, we will know how to act. Just like the third and fifth chapters of the Bhagavad Gita are devoted to the theme of action in Krishna consciousness. Bhagavad Gita does not in any way preach inaction. Rather, Bhagavad Gita preaches action. But action for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. And the Bhagavad Gita teaches us how we should act in the spirit of detachment. The Bhagavad Gita gives a very beautiful example of a lotus leaf that is in water but not touched by the water. I think you don't have lotus leaves in Russia, do you? Yes? Kṛṣṇa, okay. We have Moscow. So if you want to see a lotus leaf, you go to Kṛṣṇa or Central Asia or India. But you can visualize it. Lotus leaf stays in water but doesn't touch the water. So Krishna is also instructing us that we should act, but act in the spirit of detachment. Just like, what did Krishna tell Arjuna? Tasmat sarvesha kalesha manasmana yudicha. This is a very famous verse that according to Prabhupada summarizes the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is saying, "Hey Arjuna, with your mind and intelligence dedicated to me, act for my pleasure." Krishna did not support Arjuna's initial desire of inaction in the battlefield. Unlike the present day wars, like there were rumors about India-Pakistan war taking place and so many other political wars that take place. The battle of Kṛṣṇa was a spiritual war and not a mature war. The Pandavas had a father whose name was King Pandu and had an uncle whose name was Dhritarashtra. They both had a father called Vichitravirya. So when the father died, the eldest son should have become the king. Spiritual monarchy is a perfect form of government for society. It's far superior to the present concept of democracy or political democracy. So, Dhritarashtra could not become the king because he was blind. As a result, his younger brother became the king. But his younger brother died at a young age, leaving behind 5 young children. So the uncle became the caretaker of the empire with the understanding that when the children would come of age, they would be given the kingdom. However, when they came of age, their uncle, influenced by his son, had changed his mind. And he didn't want to return the kingdom. Instead, he devised various plans of which his brothers may die. The tribulations that the Pandavas had to go through are almost unmatched in history. And they say, Rakhe Krishna Mahare Ke, Mahare Krishna Rakhe Ke. For Krishna wants to protect, no one can annihilate. And if Krishna wants to annihilate, no one can protect. So, the Pandavas were very magnanimous. They were entitled to the vast kingdom, but they were ready to settle for 5 villages. Can you imagine that? Someone entitled to the whole kingdom, whole planet, and he said, "Okay, give me only 5 villages." It's amazing, isn't it?
Это удивительно, не правда?
Just shows you how detached the Pandavas were. And what did the Dhritarashtra say? What did his son say? We'll give you 5 villages? No! We won't even give you enough land to penetrate a needle. Krishna also went as a messenger. And they laughed it off. They laughed it off.
Но пандавы имели право на все царство. И Кришна объясняет в Бхагавад-гите, что мы должны действовать с умом и чувствами, посвященными Ему, и мы должны исполнять таким образом свой долг.
So the point is, we gave this to explain that since the body we obtain is a result of our desires, our actions, and our thoughts at the moment of death, one who is intelligent must learn to act for the pleasure of Krishna as directed by Krishna in the revealed scriptures. By studying the Bhagavad Gita, one will become wise. And you may say, "But I'm already wise. I don't need to become any wiser." We all love to think that we are wise. Once you become wise, you don't want to take part in activities that will give you temporary happiness. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 5th chapter, one who is wise does not take pleasure in the sources of misery. He does not take part in the sources of misery which are derived of contact with the material senses. Why?
Почему?
Why does an intelligent man not take part with? Krishna says such activities have a beginning and an end, and therefore the wise man does not delight in them. The material is unaware of this knowledge and totally engrossed in sense enjoyment. He doesn't think, he doesn't understand that these so-called pleasure is temporary. They have a beginning and an end. So one who is wise does not take pleasure in activities that are ultimately source of misery. Therefore Krishna says, before giving up his body, one must learn the art of tolerating the mind and the senses. One should tolerate the urges of the mind and the senses. And if we're able to tolerate the urges of the mind and the senses as a result of higher cultivation of knowledge, then we can progress spiritually. Now it is not that the Krishna conscious person has no desires. A Krishna conscious person has mind, intelligence and senses, and a non-Krishna conscious person has the same facilities also. So what's the difference?
Разница в том, что преданный стремится использовать свой ум, разум и чувства в служении Господу. В то время как материалист хочет использовать свой ум, разум и чувства независимо от воли Господа. В пятой песне Шримад Бхагаватам можно прочитать наставление, которое Господь Ришабхадева давал своим 100 сыновьям. И в одном из стихов он говорит: «Нуна прамата куртая карма», что те люди, которые заняты деятельностью, противоречащей законам Бога, заповедям, которые дал Господь, на самом деле являются безумцами.
Because they presently have a body which is giving them nothing but trouble. And by engaging in activities independent of the scriptures, with the gaining of a body, which will give them nothing but trouble. The intelligent person recognizes that this mental body is nothing but a source of trouble. He realizes that any pleasure derived of contact with senses, with sense objects, is temporary and tomorrow will become the cause of pain. Therefore, the intelligent person uses the mind, intelligence and senses in service of the Lord. We should not overlook the fact that our actions will influence the type of body we'll get in future. The happiness and distress that we experience is a result of our actions also. Of course, those who come to Krishna consciousness are most fortunate. They have done mass past activities to get the opportunity to come to Krishna consciousness. But one thing you must recognize, the material body is always a source of trouble. So the solution is not that you terminate your material body because it's a source of trouble, but you purify the utilization of the material body, mind and senses. In the Bhagavatam it is said, the very activity that causes you bondage can become the source of liberation when applied properly. Just like milk gives you a bad stomach, but the same milk, when it is consumed in the form of yogurt, it cures your bad stomach. So the actual seer, Prabhupada talks about this in the purport, the actual seer is one who can understand that this material body I have is a result of my past actions, and I must purify my desires so that I can achieve the goal of life. A spiritualist has a vision of eternity. What does it mean to have the vision of eternity?
Что это значит, иметь видение вечности? Это означает понимать вторую главу, утверждение второй главы Бхагавад-гиты, где говорится о том, что душа вечна по своей природе. Кришна объясняет, что вечная неразрушимая душа находится вне гун материальной природы. И душу невозможно ни рассечь на части, ни иссушить, ни сжечь и так далее. И это понимание вечности души является следствием правильного общения. В Шримад Бхагаватам в первой песне описывается, что когда Махарадж Парикшит был проклят на смерть, он задал очень актуальный вопрос. Потому что он повесил мертвую змею на шею мудреца Шамики Риши. Парикшит Махарадж охотился в лесу, и ему очень сильно захотелось пить. Он был святым царем. И в поисках воды он забрел в ашрам святого мудреца, где он увидел великого мудреца, который в тот момент пребывал в трансцендентной медитации. И царь даже не взглянул, и мудрец даже не взглянул на царя, когда тот зашел в его ашрам. И царь оскорбился, он подумал, что я пришел в ашрам этого мудреца, он даже на меня не взглянул. И когда он уже уходил из ашрама, он увидел мертвую змею, и в гневе он повесил мертвую змею на шею мудреца. Как мы когда хотим оказать кому-то почести, одеваем ему гирлянду. Точно так же этот царь Парикшит хотел таким образом отомстить мудрецу, и он одел ему на шею гирлянду, хотел его оскорбить таким образом. Когда царь выходил из ашрама, он встретил сына мудреца, который играл рядом с ашрамом. И этот мальчик подумал: вот царь вышел из ашрама моего отца, пойду посмотрю, что отец скажет.
That snake on the father's neck. He could understand that this was the work of the king.
И он понял, что это дело рук царя.
So the king naturally invited all the great sages of the planet and asked them a very simple question. The question was, what should one do who is about to die? So in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, in the third chapter, the second canto opens by GKG Goswami telling the king that I have already described to you how I've already given you the answer to your question. What should one do who is about to die? And he gave the answer in the two verses, try to. In the last two verses of the second chapter of the second canto. And what did he say in these two verses? It first said that by hearing, chanting and meditating on the Lord, one can purify one's existence. So this represents the process of Śrīla, Kirtanam and Vishnu Smaranam. And by utilizing this process, Śrīla, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, one can cleanse the heart and develop spiritual desires and replace material desires with spiritual desires. Desires have to be there, action has to be there. But the difference between spiritualists and materialists is the spiritualist desire is to use the mind, body and senses in service of the Lord versus using it for sense enjoyment. So we've all heard about the importance of these three things, Śrīla, Kirtanam and Vishnu Smaranam. It's not that you're hearing the importance for the first time. But we keep hearing again and again. If you read the Bhagavatam, from the first canto to the 12th canto, this importance comes up again and again and again in different sections of the Bhagavatam. For example, in the first canto, Krishna says, Shravana Sakata Krishna Punya Shravat Kirtana. By hearing the pious names of the Lord, all that is inauspicious in the heart gets destroyed. But the same point is again repeated in the second canto. And it goes on getting repeated right till the end of the Bhagavatam. Because we need to be reminded about its importance. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shastra said how the Lord is so kind that He has invested all His transcendental energies in His holy name. He says, as the Lord was playing the role of a devotee, He said, I'm so unfortunate, I have no attraction for them. So we have no strong attraction. But by practicing the process of devotional service, we are aiming to develop attraction. With regards to the chanting of the holy name, the Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that there are three different stages of chanting the holy name. First is Namaprad, then Namabhasa, and then Shuddha. So Namaprad means you're chanting the holy name and committing offenses at the same time. You're chanting the holy name and not following the regulated principles, for example. But nevertheless, you're chanting. If you keep chanting, even if that was Namaprad, and you stay in the association of devotees, then you get exposed to spiritual knowledge. And as a result, you understand what are the aparats to follow, what are the rules and regulations to follow. When Prabhupada opened the first Krishna conscious ashram in New York, he didn't give the ashramites any rules and regulations. Only told them to just chant Hare Krishna. Some of you may be wondering, I wish we had the same standard today. Life would be a lot easier if we just said, chant 16 rounds and don't worry about anything else. Recently, about 3 weeks ago, I was in Kenya, which is in East Africa. So, there was a Swami who had come there from Vrindavan. So he was giving lectures aimed at primarily pulling ISKCON's congregation into his camp. You know, we have a certain congregation that comes to our temple, but he was trying to get them attracted towards him. So he was saying chant Hare Krishna, he was talking about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, talking of pretty much what we talk. But he was giving instant initiation, instant, in 1 minute. So some people were thinking, oh boy, this is so easy, you don't have to pass an exam, you don't have to wait 1 year and it's going to pass so many exams and wait. But then they realized that he doesn't give any rules and regulations. So then they were intelligent, they could say, yes, no rules and regulations, definitely you're not going to make the same spiritual advancement. They say, yes, we want the real thing, we don't want imitation. So Prabhupada, when he opened the first ashram, he told people just chant Hare Krishna. But after they chanted for some time, they themselves came up to Prabhupada. Those days they used to call him Swamiji. They said, Swami, don't you want us to follow some rules and regulations? And Prabhupada said, this is the day I was waiting for. And you would come yourself and ask. And then Prabhupada introduced all these rules and regulations. So when you come in contact with the devotees, you get exposed to knowledge as to what are the Vaishnava Prayas, what are the spiritual standards, what are the rules and regulations, etc. So this is known as the stage of Namabhasa. That's the stage where you're endeavoring to chant and avoid the offense. And then if you keep chanting, trying hard to avoid the offenses, you'll get to the state of purified chanting. This can also be compared to the different stages in the development of sugar, for example. First there is just the seed of the sugar cane. Then when the seed is planted, the sugar cane grows. Then the juice is extracted from the cane. Then when the juice is boiled, there's liquid molasses, then a solid molasses, and then sugar candies. So similarly, the chanting of the holy name, it becomes sweeter and sweeter as the dirt gets eliminated. Just like a diseased man, if he's diseased, there's a disease called jaundice. In that disease, even if you're given the sweetest of things to taste, you can't appreciate the sweetness. Do they have jaundice in Russia?
В России бывает желтуха. В тропических странах это очень часто случается.
There's some diseases that are strong in some countries and not existent in other countries. So in jaundice, even if you're given sugarcane juice, you won't appreciate its sweetness.
Но по мере выздоровления вы сможете чувствовать этот вкус все больше и больше. И наше трансцендентное видение будет развиваться по мере общения с преданными и по мере следования наставлениям святых мудрецов. Однажды Санатана Госвами пришел к Харидасу Тхакуру.
He told Haridas Thakur, some people preach and do not practice, and some practice and do not preach. But you are simultaneously doing both, practice and preach. So Prabhupada says in the purport, this is what the Krishna conscious devotee should be doing, developing an ideal character and at the same time preaching Krishna consciousness. So as you purify the quality of our chanting, we'll also be able to develop transcendental qualities and also try to develop a sound spiritual character. And as you begin to develop these qualities, one of the first qualities you develop is the quality of Kripalu. And what is Kripalu?
Что значит Крипалу?
Preach, merciful. And being merciful means what? Preaching.
Проповеди.
Having a desire to preach. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was explaining 26 qualities of Sanatana Goswami, the first quality he mentioned was Kripalu. So each of us has to come up to the standard that Chaitanya, that Sanatana Goswami said regarding Haridas. Keep endeavoring for improving purity. It comes by chanting, hearing, and remember. So to summarize the verse of the Gita that we read today, Krishna is pointing out that the body is created by material nature.
И душа ничего не делает. Душа отлична от тела.
This body is made by material nature. The type of body you get is determined by your desires or actions. Desires influence actions. Let's say you desire to go back to Godhead.
Но ваши действия направляют вас в противоположную сторону. Вернетесь ли вы обратно к Богу?
Your actions have to be consistent with your desires and actions both have to be consistent with the Lord's instructions. Then you can make spiritual advance. And one who has a vision of eternity, he knows the imperishable nature of the soul. He knows that just as the sky, which is all pervasive, does not mix with anything. Similarly, the soul does not mix with anything, but it retains its identity. So we must, in other words, we must understand the difference between the body and the self. Body is perishable, soul is imperishable. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So any questions? I thought it's 9 o'clock.
Есть. Тогда сегодня не будет.
Today the cake is only for show. It's going to be distributed tomorrow.
Сегодня торт только выставляется на показ. Завтра будет раздаваться.
It's only meant to create an appetite in you.
Сегодня он только для аппетита здесь выставлен. Реклама.
Okay. So
Identify devotees doing devotional service, but his desire is not to please the Lord, but to please his senses. Cannot be called to devotional service, and thus he attains the devotional service.
So even if you desire, so you're doing devotional service, but your desire is to get some pleasure for yourself, still you get some element of benefit, sure.
Если вы занимаетесь преданным служением, но при этом у вас желание собственных наслаждений, то, несомненно, вы получаете некоторое благо от такого служения.
But that doesn't mean you remain satisfied and think, oh, I'm getting some benefit, so I'll just stay at this standard and not progress
Но
further.
это не означает, что вы должны думать, ну хорошо, я какое-то благо получаю, поэтому на этом уровне и должен оставаться.
The chanting is so powerful. For example, when we go on a Harinam, even the plants, the trees, the animals on the road, they all benefit when they hear the holy name.
Повторение святого имени настолько могущественный метод, как, например, когда мы выходим на Харинаму, то все, кто слышит святое имя, получают благо. Даже растения, даже животные, которые встречаются нам по пути.
In the initial stages, everyone's service is motivated.
На начальных ступенях у всех служение корыстное, имеет какие-то корыстные мотивы.
Just like when Prabhupada first started the first temple in New York, he introduced the Sunday feast program.
Как, например, когда Шрила Прабхупада открыл первый храм в Нью-Йорке, он ввел вот эти воскресные пиры любви.
And Prabhupada would make, along with his disciples, special feast that would have sweet rice, rasgulla, halwa.
И Шрила Прабхупада вместе со своими учениками каждое воскресенье готовил особый пир. Там был сладкий рис, халва, расагулы, покоры.
So many people would come to the temple just for the Sunday feast.
И многие люди приходили в храм просто на пир, на воскресный пир.
But they got so purified by eating prasad that they ended up becoming devotees.
Но в результате, кушая прасад, они настолько очистились, что стали преданными.
Yes.
Расскажите немного о 6 принципах Тадати.
А? О 6 принципах?
Тадати.
Could you tell a bit about 6 principles of Dadati?
Well, maybe I can do that tomorrow.
Может быть, завтра?
The 6 principles, it's a long discussion.
Потому что это долгая, это тема достойна долгого обсуждения.
Reveal your mind, take instructions.
То есть это 6 принципов взаимоотношений между преданными. Это говорить о наболевшем, открывать свой ум и принимать наставления.
Don't reveal your mind to the wrong person.
Но не нужно открывать свой ум неподходящему человеку.
Very often what you see is someone's having spiritual trouble, he reveals his mind to the others who are also in Maya.
Часто бывает так, что человек, у которого духовные проблемы, делится своими проблемами с тем человеком, который сам в майе находится. Поэтому нужно открывать свой ум только тем, кто более продвинут, чем
Give in charity, accept charity.
Затем нужно дарить подарки и принимать подарки.
Serve 𝐃𝐸𝐬𝐭𝐫𝐸𝐴 and eat 𝐾-prasad.
Затем также нужно раздавать торты и вкушать торты.
Okay. Offer prasad and take
То есть нужно раздавать прасад, предлагать другим прасад и самим вкушать прасад.
Okay, you can ask this question tomorrow.
Завтра вы можете еще раз задать этот вопрос, мы подробно остановимся на этом.
As I told you in the beginning, I was flying all night last night.
Я уже говорил, что я всю ночь летел в самолете сегодня.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.